"You look cold, mister. You can use my blanket," the homeless girl whispered to the man sitting alone, not knowing he was a lonely CEO millionaire. Night in downtown Chicago bled into silence, save for the hum of distant traffic and the sharp whisper of wind rattling trash cans. At a deserted intersection by an abandoned gas station, Evan Cross stood alone, his breath visible in the chill air. He wore a heavy coat, but each gust seemed to pierce deeper, reminding him that no fabric could numb the emptiness within. At 39, Evan was CEO of Pinnacle Hotels, a chain he had built from childhood scars to fill the void his family left behind. Tonight he was far from boardrooms and business flights, standing beneath a flickering street lamp, smaller than ever. From the shadows beside a rusted, decrepit van parked behind a closed bakery, a figure emerged. A young woman with golden hair that caught the faint light like threads of spun sunlight. She approached cautiously, clutching a thin, frayed blanket to her chest. When she spoke, her voice was calm yet soft, matching the quiet night. "You look cold, mister. You can use my blanket." He stiffened at the offer, about to refuse, but before he could speak, she placed the worn blanket in his gloved hands. It landed gently, as if she were offering him something fragile and rare. "I am used to the cold," she said quietly. "But you look like you lost something." Street lamp glow revealed her eyes, clear, bright, yet framed by sorrow. They were eyes that had known hardship, but still showed empathy. Evan felt a sharp pang, a memory long buried. His older brother had protected him from their stepfather's cruelty, sacrificing his own safety. That memory tore into him tonight. He gripped the blanket with trembling fingers. He considered turning and walking away into the darkness, but she stayed, steady and still. Impulsively, he reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small loaf of warm bread he'd grabbed from a late-night hotel pantry. He pressed it into her hands and said, his voice softer than he intended, "You might need warmth inside, too." Her surprise was subtle. She accepted the bread, fingers brushing his. A gentle, uncertain smile curved her lips. That moment, someone offering kindness without pity, without condition. It was new to both of them. He inhaled sharply, noticing the fine features of her face, the curve of her jaw, the slope of her shoulders, the loose waves of her golden hair. Her clothes were layered and mismatched, worn from nights spent in shadowed corners. At her feet lay a weathered notebook, the sort used for jotting stories or sketches. He found his voice again. "Do you sleep near here?" She nodded and pointed toward the van, her shelter of last resort. "Not mine," she said, flicking a finger at the vehicle. "I stay inside if needed. It protects me from wind and the cold concrete." He understood. The van was abandoned long ago, a forgotten shell, just like how she might feel sometimes. Yet she had made it a refuge. She tucked the blanket under her arm. "I have grown used to being invisible," she admitted, voice soft. Evan felt stripped of pretense. "I am Evan Cross," he said, offering his name, even though the cold and his grief warred within him. She paused, tilting her head, evaluating whether this stranger was someone she could trust, then, quietly, "Rosie." A long silence passed, filled only by the faint glow of streetlights and the distant rumble of cars passing on Washington Street. He nodded and moved closer, uncertain and tentative. "May I sit for a moment?" She shrugged, lips pressed in a calm line. "If you want, I won't pretend you're not drifting." They stood side by side, wrapped in that thin blanket, sharing silent company on a night where loneliness had become normal. Gently, he covered a portion of her shoulders. She leaned in, as if to rest briefly on a stranger's warmth. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and met his gaze. "Thank you for the bread." He let the silence stretch, then nodded again. "We both need some warmth tonight." Rosie looked toward the broken windows of the gas station and the dark van beyond. She looked at Evan then, as if measuring something unseen between them. In that quiet intersection beneath a lonely street lamp, between silence and the city that never slept, two damaged souls found a spark neither expected. Evan felt the faint stirrings of hope. Rosie felt something she seldom allowed: safety. They were strangers, yet for this single night, standing there under pale light, they were exactly where they needed to be. Night after night, Evan Cross returned to the same deserted corner of Chicago, this time arriving with purpose, his expensive coat swapped for a plain jacket and jeans. He walked from the gas station to the abandoned van where Rosie often sheltered, careful to remain unremarkable. The city's bright lights felt distant here, and somehow the contrast drew him in deeper than any boardroom ever could. One evening he found her nestled inside the van, a small beam of flashlight flickering over her golden hair as she bent over a tiny notebook. She wrote with steady focus, utterly absorbed. Evan hesitated, then knocked softly on the van's door. She looked up, startled, softening into a shy smile. "You write in there often?" he asked gently. "What are you working on? Looks like the start of a story." Rosie lowered the light, cheeks coloring under the faint glow. "Just little stories for children," she admitted, a quiet humility in her voice. "I used to teach preschool. Now I write them, so I do not forget them." Her confession struck him. He slid a hand into his jacket past and emerged with a steaming cup of hot cocoa he had purchased from a 24-hour convenience store a block away. He extended it carefully. "I got this for you," he said softly. "You need it more than I do. The kids, your students, they would love having a warm teacher." Rosie blinked, her fingers trembling slightly as she accepted the cup. She wrapped both hands around it, closing her eyes briefly, drawing in the heat. "Thank you," she murmured. They shared a quiet moment in the hush of the empty street. The wind rustled debris near the gas pumps. Evan stayed silent, watching her hold that cup as if it were a fragile treasure. She finally looked up, meeting his eyes, and the air between them felt different, comforting rather than lonely. Rosie cleared her throat before speaking. I lost that job because I reported my boss for inappropriate behavior. He denied everything, and the school refused to hear my story. After that, no one would hire me. I lost everything. I could not even tell my parents. I could not bring them shame." Her words settled heavily between them. Evan felt his heart twist. His brother had been the only person he trusted, the only anchor. Now he was gone, and he felt adrift. Rosie's pain mirrored his own in ways he could not deny. He swallowed and asked softly, "So, you only wanted someone to stay?" Her gaze flickered into the darkness. "I do not need rescuing," she said firmly. "I just fear people will leave, like others have left me." Evan's chest tightened. He was that person, the one who failed to stay when his brother needed him most. He felt a tremor of regret. For minutes they simply sat in companionable silence. The wind passed at intervals, carrying city murmurs from blocks away. Evan cleared his throat. I come back because I want to see if you are okay." Rosie looked at him, surprised, a soft light kindling in her eyes. She shifted slightly and tapped her notebook. "You make me believe in kindness again. I look forward to our short talks, even when you disappear. It gives me something to hope for." The tremor in Rosie's words touched him more than she knew. He joined her in silence again, letting the moment settle like warm smoke. Then the city lights flickered beyond the vacant storefronts, and he realized how unnatural the world felt when she was gone. He stood. "Take care, Rosie," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, holding her notebook to her chest. "You too." He walked away under flickering street lamps, feeling raw and unexpectedly alive. He thought, "Why does this feel more real than anything I have ever built?" He almost whispered it to himself. Rosie sipped the cocoa slowly, savoring more than just the warmth. She watched Evan's back recede, the dark figure a mystery she was both drawn to and afraid of. Her heart thumped that painful, hopeful rhythm, long before she understood it was more than companionship. In those nights beneath street lamps, two strangers began weaving a fragile connection built on silent honesty and small gestures. He offered hot cocoa. She offered stories and truth. Neither asked for rescue, only that someone would not leave. Evan found reason to return. Rosie found reason to write again. Something unspoken passed between them, an ember of belonging neither had expected to find in the cold. Evan became a regular presence at that deserted Chicago corner, always arriving quietly in his unassuming jacket. One particularly stormy night he spotted Rosie crouched beneath a broken awning beside the abandoned van. Rain fell in angled sheets, and she shivered in wet clothing that clung to her thin frame. When a speeding car lost control around the corner, water surged across the street like a wave aimed at her. Instinctively, Evan lunged forward, grabbing her arm and pulling her back just before the torrent hit. The icy water splashed over him, soaking his clothes and chilling him through to the bone, while Rosie ducked behind him, momentarily safe. Rosie gasped, drenched and stunned. Evan stood tall in the downpour, shielding her body from the wind and rain until the car passed. Then, shivering, he removed the thin blanket, the same one she had offered him days earlier, and pressed it into her hands. "Use this," he said, voice hoarse with cold. "You should be dry." Tears ran in thin streams down Rosie's cheeks, mixing with the rain. She pressed the blanket against his soaked coat, absorbing cold droplets. She pressed it to his chest. Neither spoke for a long moment. When Rosie finally lifted her head, her face serious, her eyes glistened under the streetlight. She whispered, "Thank you." Later that evening, they huddled under a larger awning, garments drying slowly. Rosie asked softly, "Have you ever felt like you do not belong where you are standing?" Evan nodded, eyes distant. "Yes. I thought that wealth or success would fill every void, but instead I only felt more invisible, more alone." He noticed Rosie trembling despite the blanket. Without hesitation, he unearthed the jacket he had been wearing and draped it over her shoulders. She shook her head, but he would not relent. "Take it. I am already shaking," he said with gentle insistence. The kindness in his gaze made her flush. She wrapped the jacket tighter, ashamed yet grateful. Then Rosie asked quietly, uncertainty in her tone, "If you knew I sleep by the van, living out here, would you still want to talk to me?" Her question clanged in Evan's chest, a painful echo of his own childhood fears. He offered her a steady look. "Yes. You are the first person who made me feel safe just by being here. You showed me it does not require fame or status to matter." Rosie's lips quivered as tears escaped. She leaned against the jacket, inhaling its faint scent, as if to anchor herself. She had never been told she mattered by someone who didn't owe her anything. As they stood there, soaked and silent, Evan found himself thinking of Rosie that night, more than anything else. He felt a fierce urge to make sure she would not remain out here, vulnerable, under the indifferent city sky. When the rain finally let up, Evan escorted Rosie to the edge of the intersection. He said softly, "You should not have to do this alone." Rosie looked at him, blinking rapidly. Something in his tone convinced her he meant it, but she only said, Thank you." He turned and disappeared back into the darkness, his jacket left with Rosie. She stood there, holding both the blanket and his coat, feeling their warmth still. In the following days, Evan made a decision. He returned often, not just for their conversations, but because he realized Rosie could easily be forgotten by the world. That freezing night, the lives intersected, and afterward he felt compelled to do more. He envisioned finding a way to help her, something practical, something lasting, without revealing who he really was. As Rosie blinked the memory of that cold, shared moment away, she realized two things. First, that someone had risked themselves for her. Second, that perhaps she deserved someone who did not vanish. Neither spoke of love yet, but both carried new weight in their hearts. Evan carried a promise that he would not stand by while she remained exposed to the elements. Rosie carried hope that maybe, just maybe, someone saw her beyond her circumstances. Each evening, Evan Cross entered the grand lobby of Pinnacle Hotel in a simple suit, carrying a folder and introducing himself as Evan, a mid-level events coordinator. He arrived just in time for Rosie's shift. She assisted him with children's storytelling events held in the courtyard beneath strings of fairy lights. With a small notebook in hand, Rosie read tales of kindness and courage. From a discreet corner, Evan watched her. The children leaned forward, entranced by her warm, golden voice. After each event, as families drifted away, Evan approached. "You tell stories beautifully," he said, voice gentle. "Those children adore you." Rosie's cheeks flushed as she nodded shyly. "Thank you," she replied softly, glancing away as if recalling a childhood she had lost and a future she longed for. Over the week, Evan made small gestures. One morning, Rosie found a brand new notebook and sleek pen on her desk, accompanied by a note in delicate handwriting. "Keep writing your stories." She ran trembling fingers over the notebook's cover, clasping it to her chest. Her eyes glittered with gratitude and bittersweet hope. Evan saw potential in her, respected her, even without asking about her past. Rosie threw herself into every event, arranging cushions, welcoming children, practicing her stories. In the evenings, she returned near her shelter van to write new lines by the lamplight, the notebook from Evan giving her renewed purpose. Evan drifted by occasionally, quietly adjusting props or offering encouragement, watching the walls of doubt fall away from her growing grin. Usay said, "Tony Milo." One afternoon in the staff lounge, Rosie overheard two managers. "Mr. Cross wants the proposal by day's end," said one. "CEO isn't available to meet personally," answered another. She froze beside the coffee station, heart racing. The voice conveyed authority, not the easy warmth of Evan. She recalled their night under the street lamp, blanket and cocoa shared. Evan had never mentioned a last name. The unseen CEO sounded commanding. She touched her lips, unnerved by the revelation. Later, sneaking into the ballroom, she observed Evan taking a private call. He straightened his tie, placed a leather-bound notebook against his side, and spoke with calm confidence. "Proceed with the pavilion renovation. Yes, I believe in the team." His tone was resolute. That man was no coordinator. Something inside Rosie stilled. After the event, she approached quietly. "Evan," she said softly, using the name he had always answered to. "You're not just the event manager, are you?" Her voice wavered. Evan paused, jaw tight, fingers working through coat fabric. "It is complicated," he said at last, eyes steering clear. "I have responsibilities I cannot share yet." Anxiety flickered in his gaze. Her heart thudded, not with fear, but longing and uncertainty. That night, long after the fairy lights had fizzled out, Rosie returned to the bench by the van. She opened the notebook from Evan, flipping through blank pages, her breath caught in tears. She looked toward the hotel reception desk, where Evan stood polishing glasses. He glanced her way, expression unreadable. Her inhale faltered as the truth sank in. She had come to care deeply, and she feared he was unreachable. Later, outside under the street lamp, she remained until Evan emerged. When he saw her, he held up her coat, the one he had lent after rescuing her from the rain weeks ago. "You forgot this," he said softly, extending it to her. She closed her fingers around the fabric and his hand when he hesitated to pull back. That simple gesture spoke volumes, mutual reverence, growing affection, and unspoken fear. Evan turned and walked away without another word. Rosie stood rooted, clutching both the notebook and coat. Her hands trembled, resolve settling in. She whispered to herself, "I cannot uncare now." And Evan, walking into the night, thought only, "I must protect her, but will she let me?" Walt said, Evan trembled, and when he did, they had stepped together into his world, a world of corridors, key cards, and rigid roles. But neither had yet bridged the truth between them. Yet beneath it all, something fragile and hopeful simmered, waiting to be claimed. Evan avoided the city corner for days. The street lamp visits stopped. He buried himself in the office, navigating tense negotiations and investor demands. No calls, no cocoa. Rosie noticed his absence. Each evening at the storytelling events, she carried on, smiling for children, but something inside her felt hollow. Without Evan's quiet presence, her tasks turned mechanical. She kept wondering, had she done something wrong? One afternoon, during a break, she confided in a colleague. "I feel out of place," she whispered. "Maybe he only spent time with me because he felt sorry for me." The colleague offered kind words, but Rosie only smiled faintly and returned to work, heavier with doubt. A few days later, an unexpected message arrived, a request from corporate to review event feedback in the executive office. Rosie hesitated before entering the elevator. When the doors opened onto the top floor, the marble corridor felt too quiet, too polished. A staff member directed her to the leadership wall. There it was, the first portrait, Evan Cross, Chief Executive Officer. His image, confident, composed, stared back from the glass. Rosie's breath caught. The truth sank in like ice water. James, the kind man who brought cocoa, who smiled at her stories, was also Evan Cross. He had hidden this. Every soft moment, every late-night visit, she replayed them now with doubt. She turned and hurried back down the stairs, fighting tears. Outside, night had fallen. She collapsed beside the rusted van, pressing her cheek to the cold metal, her heart breaking in silence. Inside the hotel, security footage showed her departure. Evan froze when staff told him. Watching her leave, a familiar ache returned. Regret. He returned to his office, replaying every word he hadn't said. He had hoped she'd never find out this way. He had hoped he could be just Evan. That night, Rosie sat at her old curb, the blanket wrapped tightly. She remembered the first cocoa, the way he had stood between her and the rain, his jacket, his hands. Were those moments real? Evan arrived near midnight, his steps slower than usual. He saw her silhouette near the van and hesitated, then walked forward. "Rosie," he said, almost a whisper. She did not look up. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he continued. From his pocket he pulled out a cup, not cocoa this time, but tea. "You left before we could talk. I thought I lost the chance." His voice cracked slightly. Rosie finally glanced at him. "So it was pity?" she asked. "No," he said quickly. "It was never pity. After you pulled me back from that street, I needed to protect you. I didn't know how to tell you who I was without ruining what we had." She closed her eyes, her breath unsteady. "I wanted to build something safe," he said, "but I did it all wrong." Then, carefully, he handed her a folded card. In quiet script, it read, "I would like to offer you something permanent. When you're ready." No title, no name, just a gesture. Rosie opened the card slowly, her hands trembling. Something inside her shifted, not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something gentler. Evan turned, paused. "Stay," he said softly, "or go." She did not speak. But after a moment she nodded once. Together they walked back to her spot near the van, where light still touched the broken concrete. Not much had changed in the world, but between them, something had begun again. Rosie stood just inside the executive office of Pinnacle Hotels, dressed in her modest staff uniform, her golden hair unruly, cheeks stained from sleepless nights and unshed tears. The room shimmered with polished surfaces and framed accolades, every corner a testament to power and prestige. She inhaled sharply and looked at the man behind the glass wall. Evan Cross, CEO, yet he appeared smaller than she had imagined. She took a step forward, voice trembling as she spoke. "Why did you hide it from me? You pitied me, didn't you?" The words echoed in the hushed quiet. Evan's chest tightened. He stepped out of the office to stand before her. His suit was impeccable, yet there was something vulnerable in how he approached her. He spoke softly. "Rosie, I did not rescue you. You saved me. The night you gave me that blanket, I had lost myself. You reminded me who I wanted to be." Her tears broke then. She dropped her gaze, lowering her chin. "I don't want to be someone's charity," she whispered, voice fractured. She pressed her arms to her body as if to cloak herself from his words. Evan reached for her hand. "No, you're not that," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You are the first person who made me feel like I was not alone in the world." He held her hand, and for a moment Rosie could feel warmth, watered by regret that he had let her go. Silence settled around them, thick and full. Then Evan gently pulled a small package from his jacket, placing it into her hands. It was a slim book, crisp and new. She opened it to find her own short stories printed inside. On the first page lay a note. "You see the beauty that I had forgotten. Do not stop believing in your words." Rosie inhaled sharply, clutching the book to her chest. Tears fell as she looked up at him. She could see earnest admiration and something deeper flickering behind his eyes. Evan softened as he watched her. He leaned in closer, voice nearly a whisper. His breath caught. "I never meant to hurt you. I was afraid you'd walk away if you knew who I was." She wiped her eyes with shaking fingers. He remained silent and steady. The tension in her tightened shoulders eased slightly. She opened her mouth to speak, to demand something definitive, but only managed, "Your pity wouldn't last. But seeing this," her voice caught on the book, "this means you mattered." He nodded. "You matter more than any business deal. You mattered from the first moment." Her eyes flicked to the framed certificates on the wall, then back to his face. She fought to stem the tears. Evan paused, then offered softly, "I wish I could say everything else fell away, but I cannot erase the past. But here, with you, I want to be honest." They stood a long moment before she whispered, "I don't know if I can just erase how I felt." She lifted the book again, holding it between them like a fragile bridge. Evan managed a small, shy half-smile, voice husky. "Then we build slowly. I will wait, and we start again. Without secrets, without distance." She nodded slowly, though her eyes remained glossy, and then they stepped toward each other. He tucked the corner of her ear behind her hair gently, a motion filled with unspoken tenderness. She let him rest in that hesitation, letting him stay in her space without pushing him back. She did not yet say, "I love you," but she did not turn away. In that quiet executive office, amid plaques celebrating his achievements, the two stood in peaceful defiance of expectations. For the first time, everything he had built felt overshadowed by something far more fragile and infinitely more valuable. Outside, near the abandoned van where this story began, a cool wind chased away the last memory of the rain. Inside, Evan held Rosie's hand. The words they did not speak yet still carried weight: belonging, vulnerability, trust. And as the door closed softly behind them, they took the first step toward understanding that love without rescue can still heal everything. Rosie did not return to the hotel the next night, or the one after. She needed space. No excuses, no explanations. Just silence to sort through the confusion tightening around her heart. She stayed away from the intersection, from the warmth of stories and familiar corners. Inside Pinnacle's bright hallways, Evan noticed her absence like a skipped heartbeat. He didn't call, didn't text. Instead, he acted quietly. He arranged a scholarship for creative storytelling under her name at a children's literacy nonprofit. He also set up a small monthly fund, anonymously sent to her aging parents, enough to ease medical bills and unspoken burdens. He asked for nothing in return. A week passed. Then one early winter evening, Rosie returned. The hotel lobby glowed with soft golden lights. She walked in slowly, pausing when she spotted Evan in a plain suit by the front desk. Her voice was low, uncertain. "I don't know if I belong here anymore, but thank you for letting me try." Evan stepped forward. "Rosie," he said gently, "you belong more than anyone I know. You deserve every good thing that comes to you." "You?" She gave a slight, unsure smile and turned toward the staff corridor until she spotted a sign. A special storytelling evening open to the public, hosted right in the courtyard. It was tonight. Later, as families gathered beneath fairy lights, Evan stepped to the small stage. "Tonight's storyteller," he announced, "is someone whose words make the world softer. Please, welcome Rosie." He turned, eyes proud, as Rosie stepped into the glow. Her voice, steady but tender, filled the space. She read tales of quiet courage and hope found in small acts. Children leaned forward, hanging onto her words. Parents exchanged smiles, moved by the warmth in her tone. Halfway through, Rosie glanced at the event program. Her breath caught. Listed beneath the sponsors section was a literacy outreach group, the same one that had printed her stories into small booklets. Her fingers trembled. Evan had done this, quietly, long before she even saw her own worth. She continued reading, but her eyes shimmered. At the final line, children clapped, followed by their parents. Rosie bowed deeply, her tears falling freely. Backstage, Evan handed her the printed program. "I wanted your stories to reach beyond this place. They matter, Rosie. You matter." Rosie looked at him, voice soft and trembling. "You saw me, even when I couldn't see myself." He smiled. "You made people feel warmth again, with nothing but your voice and a notebook." They stepped outside, under the same street lamp that had once introduced them. But tonight the silence between them wasn't filled with questions. It was comfort. Evan brushed a damp strand of hair from her face. She didn't pull away. Her head rested on his shoulder, and her hand settled lightly on his arm. They began walking, side by side, past the lit courtyard, toward the street where she had once slept near a van. It no longer felt like exile. It felt like part of the path that had brought them here. Rosie looked up. "Can I stay?" Evan didn't speak. He simply took her hand. And under the soft glow of winter lights, two people stood not as CEO and former runaway, not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals, bound by trust, quiet love, and a future they were ready to build, together. The expedition. 3 months had passed since their first encounter beneath a lonely street lamp. In that time, Rosie had changed. Her golden hair gleamed under lobby lights, her posture straighter, her voice more confident. The scholarship allowed her to study storytelling, and now she was Pinnacle's official children's events coordinator. She looked like someone who finally belonged. Tonight was the season's final storytelling evening. The hotel courtyard shimmered with fairy lights, cushions scattered across the stage, firefly jars glowing on tabletops. Parents arrived, children giggled, and the evening buzzed with quiet joy. Evan slipped into the audience, wearing a crisp shirt, name tag left behind. He watched Rosie step onto the stage, calm and poised. "Tonight," she said into the mic, "we share stories of courage, kindness, and the small things that matter most." Her voice carried warmth and familiarity, and the children leaned in, captivated. Evan watched their wide eyes, saw parents' faces soften, and felt a pride so deep it made him breathless, After the applause faded, Evan rose and stepped forward. "Rosie," he said softly, "you've made this place feel like home, for all of us." Their eyes met, and she blushed, holding her notebook to her chest. Later, Evan took her to the hotel's rooftop balcony. The Chicago skyline sparkled below, and the intersection where they first met glowed faintly in the distance. It no longer looked cold, it looked like destiny. Evan turned to her and took both hands. "Rosie," he said gently, "I've loved you since the night you gave me that blanket. You brought me warmth and reminded me who I wanted to be. I don't want to be your CEO. I want to be the man who walks beside you." She touched his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. "Evan," she whispered, "you made me feel like I was enough. You gave me a place where I could be me." He leaned in, their foreheads brushing before their lips met in a soft, tender kiss. City lights twinkled around them like stars joining in celebration. From the doorway, Sophie, a young volunteer from the hotel's program, clapped with delight. "You two are the best love story I know," she laughed, disappearing as quickly as she came. Evan chuckled, then pulled a small leather-bound book from his pocket. He opened it and handed it to Rosie. The first page read, "The Corner Where I Found You." Beneath the title, "The Night I Found Someone Made of Warmth." His handwriting was awkward, but heartfelt. Rosie's eyes shimmered as she held it close. "Your first story?" she asked softly. "Our story," he replied. Inside, the ballroom held one last surprise. Staff had gathered behind a new banner, Warm Corners, an initiative Evan and Rosie had designed to support community storytelling and provide shelter for the unhoused. Rosie's voice was now at the center of something greater, an echo of kindness for others. Outside, under the night sky, they stood hand in hand. Evan rested his forehead to hers. She traced his cheek with her fingers. No more words were needed. They had come through pain and found something true. Love, born not from grand gestures, but from simple warmth, shared honestly. Below, the old intersection waited, no longer a place of loneliness, but the beginning of everything. Evan whispered, "This is home." Rosie smiled, lighting up his world. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, then maybe it reminded you of something we all need to hear. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can save someone's life. A blanket, a story, a listening ear. These things may seem small, but in the right moment, they mean everything. Evan and Rosie found each other not in boardrooms or ballrooms, but on the cold sidewalk where one soul saw another, really saw them, and from that one whispered offer of warmth, a life was rebuilt, and a love story began. If you believe in love that heals, in kindness that changes lives, and in second chances that come wrapped in quiet moments, then you're already part of our community. So if you haven't yet, please take a moment to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where real hearts meet real hope. Let's keep telling stories that remind us we're not alone, because somewhere out there, someone is still waiting to be seen.